This is a presentation of the Stonebridge Country Club member opinion study conducted by Cornerstone Decision Support. I'm Roger Heitring. Let's look at the number of people who responded to the survey. That's the respondent profile. We had 1,464 member respondents who could participate, and 661 did. That's 45% of the 1,464, and the number of households that participated was 61%. So we had a very good sample with a very small error range. Surveys like this are representing the opinion of those who participated, and with a small error range, we can project that the respondent sample is representing the entire community within a certain error range. Let's look at the profile of who responded. First, women had a little bit more voice than men in here, but we had a good representation from each. The average age last year was 72.6. And interestingly enough, even though everyone in the club aged 1 year, the average age this year is 72.5. So that means we have half the respondents were younger than 74 and half were older. As it relates to years as a member, it's a very representative sample of years 3 through 20, but we have a little bit of an undersample in the 1 to 2 and a little bit of an oversample in the 21 and longer, but we have an average of 13.9 years as a member. That comparison to some of the other clubs that I work with in South Florida is very similar. It ranges between 11 and 14 years, usually 14 and a half. From the communities within Stonebridge, thank you, very representative sample with the exception of Carrington, which is a little bit of a quieter voice with 12% compared to the 17% which they represent in the full membership. We asked how long you've been we asked how many months per year you reside in the Stonebridge community, and this sample looks very similar to what most of the clubs that I work with in South Florida look like. Most of the members are in the club community January, February, March, and April, with a little bit less in November and December. The fringe months are May and October, and then summer months is where we have the lowest population. We also asked the question, do you rent your Stonebridge home to others? 9% said they did. Of that 9%, the average months that they rent is 2.9. We asked from where did you move to Stonebridge, and the Northeast and the Midwest comprise 85%. So this is a good representative of where this membership came from. It's very similar to what it was last year. The number of members who live with another is 86%, exactly where it was last year. Living alone is 14%, and members with children younger than 23 represented 2% of the sample. And it's very similar to what it was in 24. 78% don't work, 22% do, either part or full-time, which is 1 percentage point different from last year. Members indicated their use or participation in 11 different club areas. Here they are. In comparison to last year, we see a little bit of a change in golf, which is a little bit less, main dining room a little bit less, and special events just a little bit more. Other than that, the statistical difference between 25 and 24 is nil. So a very similar profile. Dining, and golf engage most of the members. Golf, bistro, and fitness center are the more frequently used elements of the club. Members were asked, when dining outside the home, including takeout, approximately what percent of your meals are from a club venue? This is the market share of outside the home dining, which is 35%, very similar to what it was last year and very common in the club industry in South Florida. The competition outside the gates of most of the country clubs is pretty stiff, and some really good restaurants. So the competition is one factor. Availability and hours of operation at the club is another factor. Members rated their satisfaction with the value of information about activities and other matters by 7 communication sources. As you see, the comparison of these scores, which would be very satisfied would be equivalent to a 5, very dissatisfied would be a 1. The target of all country clubs is to be in satisfied zone, or the 4.00, and the average of these is 3.95, very close to 4, and statistically identical to what it was last year. But limited dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is between 3 and 8%, very similar to what it was in 24. We asked about the volume of information received. 89% said it's about right. 8% said we want more. 3% said we want less. Value drivers. Members were asked, please rate the importance of 20 components when judging the overall value of the Stonebridge Country Club membership experience. Here we have a scale of very important being a 5, very unimportant being a 1, and these are the mean scores of the top 10 most important value drivers. Food quality, staff service quality, community appearance, community security, and golf course conditions are your top 5. And you can see the strength of these. Almost no one said very unimportant or unimportant. 2 differences from last year. Leadership, information from leadership and the bistro dining became slightly less important, but yet they're number 6 and number 7 on the top 10 scale. The next 10 are important, but yet to fewer members, because largely some of these areas are not used as frequently. One change here, club website became slightly less important, but yet 4.24 with only 2% unimportant or very unimportant is still reasonably important to this membership in a way of gathering information. It's very similar to what it was in 2024. The most important set of questions we could ask in a survey like this is how satisfied you are with your overall membership experience. These are the scores. They're not statistically different from last year, but interestingly enough, it's pretty strong in the very satisfied and the satisfied percentages. 88% and 87% are either very satisfied or satisfied with staff service quality and the overall membership experience. An element of the experience while entertaining a guest is very important to this membership, and 83% in combined satisfaction ratings is pretty good, with only 5% dissatisfaction. One of the elements that makes a country club valuable is the overall social opportunities. Socializing opportunities. 78% are either satisfied or very satisfied with that, and only 2% indicate dissatisfaction. Value for the cost does not reach 4, but it rarely does in most country clubs. 3.77 is somewhere between slightly less than satisfied and neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, but only 12% dissatisfaction leaves it pretty good position compared to your competition. 4 components were rated by members about governance and management, and we have 2 significant changes. Information from the board to the membership and board performance in the past 12 years both improved, which is a 4.03 is a very strong score for information from the board. Board performance at 3.94 is higher than most country clubs, believe it or not. It rarely gets to 4. And financial management almost never gets to 4 because of perceptions about how the money that members pay into the club is used. So 78% combined satisfaction for the management team performance, and 77 for information from the board, and 72 for board performance is pretty good compared to your competition, with that particular item only 9% dissatisfaction under the 10% threshold. Members members using a 10-point scale where 0 means very unlikely and 10 means very likely, were asked to please indicate how likely they were to recommend Stonebridge Country Club to a friend or an acquaintance. This produces a net promoter score, and your score is 65. With 65 in the club industry is pretty good. Anything above 50 is good, and the score is determined by the collective percentages for promoters subtracting the collective percentages of detractors. So this is comparable to most of the clubs I work with in South Florida, where it could range anywhere from 55 to 70. So 65 is a little higher than it was last year and a little bit lower than it was in 23, but still a good score. Members were asked how much they agree or disagree with 4 statements. 2 additional statements were asked of a smaller sample. Here's what they showed in their level of agreement, and there's one that's stronger agreement than it was in last year's survey. I have adequate opportunities to voice my opinion about club manners and governance. That's a very, very important one to see improvement, and 4.14 is a very good score compared to other clubs I work with. 2 of the questions were related to a smaller sample, one to singles, which a number of 79 participated in that question, with 4.02 is statistically identical to what it was in 24. It's a good score, and I'm satisfied with the new owner orientation received from administrative staff. 101 individuals participated in that question with only 8% dissatisfaction, and 73% satisfaction produced a score of 3.95. Looks higher than it was in 24, but because of the small sample, it really wasn't statistically different. However, if I were managing the club, I would consider that an improvement. Member services reaches so many members with so many different topics. Members rated 6 different items related to member services. Satisfaction is strong and unchanged from what it was last year. A new item, IT interface, earned a score of 3.96, very close to the 4 target zone. And all the other items were exceeding that 4 level with an average of 4.17, right where it was last year, doing very well for member services. Satisfaction with member services correlates with satisfaction with the management performance, so it's a very important element of the club. We move to dining. The lounge is new this year. There were 7 elements rated by members, all of which were in pretty good shape. Food quality, 7% dissatisfaction is a pretty low percentage. Menu offerings at an average of 3.78 on a scale of very satisfied being a 5 and very dissatisfied a 1 is normal for most country clubs. 11% dissatisfaction with menu offerings is very common. Takeout and pickup service at 3.71, small sample, not a bad score. You see no dissatisfaction in that particular area. But the overall at 4.05 with 2% dissatisfaction ranges a pretty good score for this dining venue. There were several improvements last year with the bistro. There were seven items measured, and there have been 2 improvements this year, one with poolside service and the other with menu offerings. As I said before, menu offerings is a very tough component to get a high score, but improvement there is a meaningful improvement of 4 to 6%. 6% improvement in menu offerings is a good movement in 1 year. The score average of 3.94, statistically identical to what it was in 24, which is 79% satisfaction, very close to that 80% threshold. Last year, 32% were either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the menu offerings. This year it's lower at 22%. Consequently, you see the change in the mean score. The main dining room is number 13 value driver. We had between 245 and 504 members respond to these items. Menu offering has improved like it did earlier at 3.56 is a good movement. That's a pretty reasonable improvement of 8% from 3.26. So again, good indication that things are improving there. 17% dissatisfaction with menu offering compares to 27% last year. An average of 3.94 is 79% satisfaction, very close to the 80% threshold. 6 items of special events was evaluated by members, and there was one improvement compared to 24. That's in the events value for the price at 3.8 compared to 3.58 is a 6% change, and a good indication. The average of these scores is 3.95, statistically identical to last year, and overall satisfaction with special events right near that target 400 at 399. Regarding the number of social events, 86% indicated that's about the right number. 10% want more, 4% want fewer. We move to golf. Golf operation is the number 9 value driver. We had up to 538 members respond to these items. Higher satisfaction of 7% higher with golf carts, 3% improvement in tee time, preferred tee time access, but a little bit of a decline of 3% in pace of play. But the average of 4.05, identical to what it was last year, reaches that target zone, with staff service quality of cart staff being the highest score of the survey. And this is common in country clubs in the South Florida area, that they receive the highest service quality score, not only the highest score of the survey. Regarding the number of tournaments, 74% said it's about right, 22% want fewer, 4% want more. We move to the practice facility, which is part of the golf course conditions. That's the number 5 value driver in this survey. 4 improvements last year were maintained this year with an average of 4.23 compared to 4.19, statistically identical. Hardly any dissatisfaction, ranging from 2% to 5%, with a 4.26 for overall satisfaction is a very good score. With the golf course conditions moving up in importance from 8 to 5, several items showed improvement this year because of the renovation, and the maturity of the renovation is recognized by members, with all the items in green being improvements, and only one item slightly less than it was last year in restrooms at 3.93, still close to 4, and the improvement is 5% on the average from 4 to 4.20. So the golf course is doing very well, which is excellent, and you can probably identify the correlation between access to preferred tee times and the pace of play here. We go to more of the recreational elements. Number 20 value driver is tennis. Due to the small sample size, these numbers look pretty much higher than they were in 24, but in fact, statistically, they're not. Again, if I were the department director here, I would consider these an improvement. So strong 4.28, well above the 4 threshold, and with limited dissatisfaction. Individual instruction has no dissatisfaction. 1%, 2%, 3, 4, and 5 is very low. Good scores for tennis. Excellent in tournaments and events as well, compared to what most people in other clubs rate tournaments and events. The fitness center is the number 15 most important value driver. 365 participants here rated the elements of the fitness center. We had two changes, slightly less satisfaction with personal trainer service quality, but yet it exceeds 4. Facility cleanliness down from 4.21 is 3% change at 4.09, also above 4. The only ones falling below 4, typically exercise class variety, availability, and stretching space, which is unusual in this particular club because it's one of those specialty items that was affected by the renovation. 17% compares to 23% dissatisfaction last year, so a little bit of a less dissatisfaction. Overall, 3.96 for a fitness center, close to 4 equals the satisfaction semantic rating, which is good. What about aquatics? That's the number 14 value driver. 309 members rated this. The scores are pretty good with an average of 4.11, higher than it was last year because of the two improvements, pool deck cleanliness and pool furniture quality. Good scores, good experience by the members who participated with limited dissatisfaction between 1 and 13%. 13% for lounge, seating, and shade availability was less than it was last year at 20%. We move now to the community elements, starting with the tangible facilities. We have 3 changes, declines, slight declines from 4% all the way down to 8% for main dining room, as it appears to be an aging factor possibly, but 4.48 for the bistro, which is down 4%, is still an extremely strong score and something to be very proud of. Interior appearance at 3.93 from 4.12, down 4%, still close to the 4. The main dining room, 3.77, the biggest drop at 8%. Still, the average, very close to the 4 it was last year, 3.98, so nothing startling here to be concerned about. What about infrastructure? So we go to these items. 2 changes. One is an improvement for parking lot appearance. One is a decline, slight, from 3.99 to 3.83 for street lighting, which is, interestingly enough, very common in country club communities. That street lighting is an issue with 14% dissatisfaction, down 4%. 3.99, though, is identical to what it was last year statistically, and a good score given that 4 is always that target area. Gate access and security has 5 items of measure, 2 of which decline slightly. Gate courtesy of the gate staff down a little bit, but still very strong at 4.34. Again, keeping in mind that 4 is the target, minimum target. And overall access and patrol operations down slightly, 4% to 4.15, still above 4 with an average still strong at 86% at 4.29. So this has been a strength of the Stonebridge Country Club for as long as I've surveyed member opinion. We've looked at a variety of scores, and overall, each one had an overall satisfaction. If we looked at putting all those together and comparing the average of all the scores, here's what it would look like. So very strong scores. There's your target of 4.00. Few or 8 items are below that target just slightly, and 8 items are above that target with meaningful distance, with an average of 4.06 for all of them. That's an 81% satisfaction. Very good for a big picture analysis of all the mean scores. If we look at the same graphic, but yet compare it to the overall item. The average is what you see in blue. The overall measure would be this. So the overall is higher at 4.13 compared to the average of all the scores of 4.06, less the overall. So there may be some items that were rated lower that did not affect the perception of the overall experience. But nonetheless, most items are far beyond the 4 target line, which is very good. We look at the same kind of comparison for staff service quality where that was measured, and we compare that to the overall rating for each of those departments, and it looks like this. The orange bar is staff service quality with an average of 4.34, the average being 4.13 for all the items. Staff service quality exceeds that and has a high correlation to overall satisfaction. And as we know in the country club industry, staff is the most valuable asset of the entire club. We've looked at satisfaction, we've looked at importance. What if we contrast the two together? It would look like we could put it on this particular frame, which is called a perceptual map. If the combination of importance and satisfaction fell into quadrant 1, it means that it was very important, but satisfaction was lower than 4, which is the vertical satisfaction line in the middle. Quadrant 2 means importance was above 4 and satisfaction was above 4. Quadrant 3, satisfaction is slightly lower and importance is slightly lower, meaning fewer people considered it important. And quadrant 4, it's lower on importance, judged by the membership, and it's higher in satisfaction. So last year, this was what your map looked like. In the green, which was an improvement over the previous year, was service quality, community appearance, fitness center, bistro, and aquatics. Declines were food quality, information, price value, grill bar and dining room, and the website. The black are the items that were unchanged from the previous year. So this is what this year looks like. Similar, only 3 changes. As we remember, in security, the guard service quality dropped just slightly, but still strong above 4. Golf course, as you saw, all those improvements. And pool with the 2 improvements, with the 2 changes. So a very stable perception of importance and value. And you notice that I use the scale 3 to 5, but if I use the scale of 1 to 5, it would look like this. So that's a much more realistic picture from the whole scaling, but the idea is to keep as much of it in the upper right as possible. Every survey, we have to look at what items garnered dissatisfaction of 10% or higher, which is a little bit of a flag for operations and governance to keep a focus of. Some of these are easier to improve than others. Here's the list. Golf walking policy at 19%, that was it garnered the highest percent of dissatisfaction. Fitness center stretching space, hard to change that. Main dining room menu offering improved, 17% is less than it was last year. Ranger effectiveness, 15%, common in most every country club. Rarely do you see ranger effectiveness at above or equal to 4. Pace of play, common. Street lighting, as we talked about, very common. Sidewalks are also a common item on this list. Financial management of the club, 13, is less than I see in some clubs. Pool shading and shade availability, pool seating and shade availability. Golf course landscaping, 13%. That was the highest of the whole golf course condition as far as dissatisfaction. Merchandise, very difficult to get below 10. Membership value for the cost is commonly higher than 12, so yes, we'd like to get it below 10. It's pretty hard to do. Appeal of the Stonebridge entrances is a capital improvement issue. Bistro menu offerings, common. golf course restrooms, unknown why that occurred. Clubhouse exterior, main dining room facility, lounge, menu offerings. So some of these are easier focus for operations. Some of them require more of a capital intensive focus. Members were asked if they want to make a comment. 396 did, that's 59% of all members, and 214 women offered comments, and these were the themes of those comments. Menu variety and options, 8.3%, really is only 18 women, but it's the most common, and I see that in most clubs. Security, 6.8, that's 14 women. Food quality and consistency, 6.2, 4.3, all the way down to overall, I'm satisfied, that's that's 9 members. So when you look at this profile compared to other clubs, if you put them in a police lineup, it'd be hard to pull out your particular profile of comments, but nonetheless, those words are important to management and they will take them very seriously. 174 men offered a comment. That was almost half of the men in the survey. And somewhat similar, housekeeping and maintenance, overall satisfaction, menu variety and options, golf operations, community and golf course landscaping. The visual element of a country club is so important to members because it creates an ambiance both on the golf course and throughout the community. But yet, 6.4, 11 members, it's not a lot of comments, but these are, again, the themes. Many members, both men and women, offered multiple themes in their comments. And again, it's somewhat of a similar profile, but when we look at the board, normally in some clubs, the board gets a much higher percentage. Here, it's only 2.8%, a very low number and percentage. Let's wrap this up and do a quick summary. What's the most important takeaways of this survey? Well, number one, 87% are satisfied or very satisfied with the overall membership experience, 88% service quality, 3% are dissatisfied, and 1% are very dissatisfied. That is extremely low and a good percent of satisfaction. Scores for the board, performance and information improved out of a potential 5, 4.03, which is unusual for any board score to be above 4, and 3.94, very good improvement from 2024. 61% of all the operational scores we talked about exceed the 4 or satisfied level, with the highest being golf course operations staff. The highest dissatisfaction, interestingly enough, is with the walking policy. 11 service quality scores range from 4.73 to 4.15, a really tight and high range of numbers out of a possible 5, with an average of 4.34, is a super important asset of any country club, and certainly Stonebridge. What about the importance? What's most important to members? Food quality, staff service quality, community appearance, security, golf course conditions. That's your top 5. That should command the focus of both governance and operations at all times. Interesting, though, I conducted an additional analysis, and 5 out of the 22 overall scores, and for any of those departments and areas, 5 of them accounted for 50% of the variance in what a member perceives as overall satisfaction with their membership experience. So these are 5 critical areas to look at. 5 out of 22 who account for that much weight starts with experience at the club when entertaining a guest. Unusual, but very important, and it has been important in previous surveys at Stonebridge. Membership value for the cost, accounts for 11% of the variance. So what am I getting for what I'm paying? It's sort of an overall judgment. Very ethereal, very hard to manage, but very important to measure. Of course, performance of the leadership, both management as well as the board. And then finally, what are those 2 leadership elements doing to to manage the financial aspects of the country club. These elements are critical for the management and governance to keep as a top of mind focus. That's it for this year. I look forward to being back with you next year.